And I was curious coming in, like, well, first, like, I know social media, TikTok short form content is like the medium of our generation. So like, how do you guys watch movies generally for entertainment?
I do.
Yeah, sometimes some of us. Um, Movies are like my favorite thing ever. So I'm gonna be maybe a little snobbish, maybe a little annoying, but I'll try to tone it down. Are you guys familiar at all with Wes Anderson?
I've
So
seen like almost all of his movies.
awesome.
I've seen it's a fantastic with Fox. That's good.
Cool. That's my favorite movie of all time. So
It's really good. That was one of the first ones I saw by him. And Moonrise Kingdom. I like that one.
that's also a great movie. Okay, but we're all like familiar with him at least? No? Okay. He's like a very millennial core director. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna be doing a comparative analysis on the work of Wes Anderson and its relation to Jacques Tati. Starting with the formalist similarities and then working into thematic similarities. So just a quick rundown. Wes Anderson, he's a Texas boy. He got his start at Sundance. He made movies with his friends. He didn't even study film, he studied philosophy. It's where he met Owen Wilson. Him and the Wilson brothers got their start together. He wrote his first couple movies with Owen Wilson, so they came up at the same time. They're like best friends. And he's known for his distinct visual style, his humor, his flat, wide imagery, his symmetry, and his like careful control of the frame. So those are a lot of his hallmarks. Jacques Tati was a French filmmaker, was making most of his work in the 50s and 60s, most of his film work, but he got his start as a mime. He was a very physical performer. Miming in France back in like the early 20th century was a lot more of a thing than like, I don't know if you could name any mimes now, I can't. So that was like a huge thing before music halls. His first film was Jour de Fête, which is it's a movie about traveling postman in France, and he's a bicyclist. He's most famous for this character he created, Monsieur Hulot, which was a character that he used for 4 of his 6 feature films, 5 of which were narrative, so he didn't make that many movies. And he's basically a dude who never talks. He's very physical, and he's like a very quirky guy put into like a very like sterile, normalized world. So he also formally will rely on like long takes, wide compositions. He builds sets. His stuff is very structured. And he's a very influential filmmaker, but like one of those like low key influential filmmakers. One of my favorite movies of all time of his is called Mon Oncle. My Uncle, and David Lynch. I found a quote saying it's one of his films that inspired him the most, and he called it a masterpiece. I would agree. I don't know if you guys are familiar with David Lynch. He's probably the GOAT. I do want to go on a little tangent real quick about a movie that Jacques Tati made before I compared him called Playtime. Playtime was a super influential movie, a super important movie. It is a movie that bankrupted Tati. So it took 9 years to make. It bankrupted him. He spent all of his personal finances on it. It was the most expensive French production up to that point. Still is one of the most if you adjust for inflation. He built an entire city made with glass and steel. A lot of like full-scale buildings, or at least like facades of buildings, like full streets and street corners. It was really good for the city's economy, but the movie made no money. Like completely bombed. It kind of ruined his career. But now, retroactively, it's hailed as one of like the best films of all time, one of the most influential films of all time. A lot of great filmmakers have cited this film specifically as seminal to their work, including Spielberg. So this is just a brief clip. I'm not going to show the whole thing of them constructing Tativille. And you can see like this wasn't like just like a normal set. They were literally building a city for one movie. This So they had different like scales too, depending on the size of the shots they needed. So they had like, and Wes Anderson does this too. They do this in stop motion movies or miniature. They'll have like the big scale sets, the full scale that humans can go into, moderate scale for like wider shots, and then like micro scale for like really wide shots if they need to fit a lot in the frame. And then, so this is my first point of comparison here. This is a set from a Wes Anderson film, Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. They used this set for 2 scenes in the whole movie. And if you can't really see, it is a full scale set. Like that is a real person. That is not like a doll or anything. These are all real people. So like full size rooms. And they only built this for just 2 scenes. There was like an establishing at the beginning of the movie, and then there's a pivotal scene in the middle of the movie where they're tracking characters going up through the rooms. So it's like basically a giant dollhouse that he made. Which brings me to their visual style and the visual inspiration. What they share in common, as I've talked about, they're meticulously constructed sets. They have a high level of control over everything that's going on. They're control freaks. Highly formal, meaning their filmmaking is not loose at all. The edit is very considered. The frame is super considered. Everything in the set is super considered. This is a direct reference from Wes Anderson to Jacques Tati.
Over the next 10 years,
This was from Mon Oncle, the Tati movie I talked about, and then this is from French Dispatch.
Into the French Dispatch, a factual weekly report on the subjects of world politics, the arts, high and low, fashion, fancy cuisine.
And I do like this comparison to this direct comparison because I think it gives you an idea too of like the differences in their sensibilities. Wes Anderson is a lot quicker paced. Jacques Tati takes his time. Everything is a lot slower, but that was also more of a sensibility of the time. Movies were just slower back when Tati made movies. People like to soak in the frame a lot more. Attention spans were generally just longer. I do like this quote. Wes Anderson was talking about Tati in a retrospective for Criterion in like the early 2000s. And he talks about like the physical performance of Tati and the importance of that, and specifically like his silhouette. Like you could see Hulot's silhouette and you know that that is that character. And Anderson tries to do that with his characters a lot where he makes them very distinct. If you've seen Royal Tenenbaums, you know, you have Ben Stiller's character wearing like a bright red jumpsuit the whole movie. Fantastic Mr. Fox, he's wearing like this tweed corduroy suit the whole movie. Another thing I like about the two of them is they derive their comedy through like the visual language and through like watching the frame. I'm not a big fan personally, this is my op-ed here, of like the Judd Apatow style of comedy where it's all just like point a camera at someone and let them riff for like 3 hours and then just pull out the best puns that they come up with. This isn't that. Everything is very deliberate. The comedy comes through the edits, through what's happening in the frame, through the actions of the characters. So this is a little beat from, again, Mon Oncle. So he's not going for like a laugh riot, like quips per minute, like let's keep like giggling the whole movie kind of thing. It's more of like this like slow burn, you know, watch everything, take it all in, set up, payoff, like classic old school comedy. And because he was a mime, that's like where his sensibility lies.
Blessing. On the one hand, the haunting.
This was from the French Dispatch.
Firing, the emission of toxic fumes and filthy exhaust pollution, the dangerous accidents, the constant traffic, the high.
Similar to Tati, Wes likes to use the physicality, what's in the frame, a little subversion. He's also very dialogue heavy, which is dissimilar to Tati. Sorry, the audio's not recording here. But that last character from French Dispatch was loosely inspired from this character from Jour de Fête, which is, as I said, Tati's first film. Um, it's very situational. So we have like the goofy cyclist and any comedy that he could derive just like from the idea of a bicycle and just using the environment. And they even have a similar beat at the end of this clip. Well, I skipped it. He rides off of a hill, just like Owen Wilson did in the last clip. So that's what that was. Another little quick thing that I'm going to talk about visually is color. If you know Wes Anderson, his color palette's very deliberate, very vibrant, quite saturated a lot of the time. It's not based in reality. They're doing a lot of this in camera, not with the color grade, but with like the actual sets and costumes. Grand Budapest Hotel is famously like really pink the whole movie. Fantastic Mr. Fox is super orange. So the color palettes are very distinct. They like to tell a story with the color, and that includes like the absence of color. So something I like that Tati does is he'll have bright, vibrant colors set amongst like very sterile and gray environments. And in fact, he uses bright colors quite garishly sometimes to really like show that these people parading as like high society are sort of clowns themselves. But more importantly than visual aesthetic, which I found to be surprising when I started comparing the two myself like directly, was the influence of sound. And I even found in those interviews I talked about earlier with Wes Anderson and David Lynch, they were both talking about how important Tati's use of sound was, which feels counterintuitive because he was a mime and he's so visually focused. But because of that and the fact that he doesn't really like dialogue, he really built out his worlds with like super involved sound. So like you would hear everything. It'd be the equivalent of like a wide deep shot where you see everything and nothing's out of focus. It'd be the same thing with the sound where like I could hear, you stop stomping your foot back there, or like if you were tapping your pencil, I'd hear that at the same time. I could hear the fan going off. Every little thing built out this world, people talking over each other instead of like hearing one conversation. You just hear snippets in and out, just like the real world if you were like just paying attention to everything around you. Yeah, that's what I had on that slide. Yes. And so where this applies to Anderson is he used a lot of the same techniques. A lot of filmmakers adopted these techniques. This was a direct evolution of sound from like Citizen Kane, which was one of the first films to like really revolutionize how sound is used in film. And then this was like the next step in that evolution. And now it's just almost commonplace. I mean, sound departments are huge now on film sets, and it's kind of almost an afterthought. But he was very deliberate, and Anderson likes to be deliberate as well. He likes to use it to cement the reality of his characters. Tati is more focused on the reality of his space, but they both use sound and lack of it the same way as they do in visuals. And this is, I feel like, a classic thing now. I feel like we've seen so many movies where there's something loud and we can't hear what the characters are saying. So this audio is working. This is the sound of the plane, and we can't hear them over it. There's a clip in Monoplay that's exactly the same. I'm not going to bother you with that. You get the point. But the sound can direct your attention just as well as the visuals can, sometimes even better. And I think like this clip highlights both his use of sound and his physicality and the importance of him with his movement. So everything's very exaggerated. Um, the emphasis is on the action. So everything is very deliberate, and you're feeling through the sound everything he wants you to hit. Every beat is emphasized. Um, some important differences that I've talked about throughout this. Tati's paced a little slower than Wes Anderson. Monsieur Hulot barely speaks. Um, and I think one of the most important things is the aesthetics of Tati are highlighting like a really flawed like societal issue. And Wes Anderson, he'll use the aesthetics to highlight his like deeply flawed characters. He's much more character focused. Um, and another thing with Tati that Anderson adopts later in his career is a lot of his films, most of his films actually, are about rampant modernization and just how quick we are to like move on to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. In his first film, Jour de Fête, he's a French postman on a bicycle, and he's inspired because like he sees a clip of American postmen like flying around and on cars and like getting places quick and quick and quick. And so he makes himself like a fool by like trying to copy that. And that's like throughout all of his films is just these themes of like rampant modernization. And in fact, this is a quick aside. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, the comedy with Steve Martin and John Candy, was pretty directly influenced by Monsieur Hulot's Jacques Tati's final narrative film. This movie called Traffic came out after Playtime on a much smaller budget, but it just pokes fun at like our means of transportation and our reliance on cars. This has nothing to do with anything. I just like that quote. That's really that. But so this is like this is the crux of everything I'm getting at is aesthetics are cool and all. There's this debate of style over substance. I feel like it's applied to Wes Anderson often. But I mean, if you really pay attention to his movies, it's not just, oh look, it's pretty. Oh look, the shots are symmetrical. Oh, it's kind of funny sometimes. It really is in service of something. And I think you see it a lot in his earlier movies, especially when he doesn't have like a huge budget. But yeah, so the movies aren't just style for style's sake. One little commonality that they both have is this upper middle class milieu. Both of their characters are, for most of their movies, are never really poor. They're always like these lost, rich to middle class people that like are kind of bored with the society they're in and the roles they're placed in. They're trying to break out of that. They're trying to find something new and exciting, which did become like a very 90s sensibility. This is a scene I like because they're both very focused on veneer and like these facades that we put on in society with other people. We try to like blend into the world we're in. We try to fit in. This is not new. It's throughout history. We have manners. We have ways of doing things. We have ways of dressing so we don't stand out. So Wes Anderson's characters, they'll always put on this facade. And the thing that gets interesting is when a situation forces a character to break their facade. And Tati does this as well, except Hulot is always out of the facade, and that's where like the comedy is derived from. But I do love this scene from The Life Aquatic where Bill Murray kind of breaks the facade he's been carrying this whole film.
Can I have a word with my son, please? Are you alright? Not really. By the way, I've been trying to think of a nickname that might mean the right thing. I came up with Papa Steve. I'm sorry I never acknowledged your existence all those years. It won't happen again. I mean it. You are my son to me. Almost more so See, for me to meet a guy like you at this time of my life, I don't know. It's just, I don't want to keep my feelings. But to me, I start to cry. That's okay. There's something in the culture.
Sorry, the volume was a little low, but at this point in the film, Bill Murray has spent the whole movie putting up this front as this like serious director. He's emotionally very closed off. Owen Wilson early in the film reveals to him that, "Hi, I'm your son," and Bill Murray he like brings Owen Wilson onto his crew. He's like pretending that he's like, okay, we're cool, like, but he acts like he's his friend and not his son, and he doesn't let him call him dad, and he doesn't like to acknowledge anything about their relation. And so the whole movie, he's like sort of trying to live vicariously through Owen Wilson without acknowledging Owen Wilson as his actual child. And at that point in the film, he's kind of accepted his failure and the fact that Owen Wilson being in his life is actually not a reflection of his failure, but a reflection of potential success. So I find that moment very sweet, and I find a lot of moments in Wes Anderson movies to be similar, where the whole movie, they have like this veneer, and they're acting all put together, and then at a certain point going into the third act, they break it, and I find it very emotionally charging, much more than if they were like raw and open the whole movie, because most people aren't raw and open their whole lives. Which brings me again to Jacques Tati. Conversely, like I said, Hulot isn't concerned with the world around him. He's blissfully unaware of it. And the comedy is because he is not participating in this made up world that everybody else has constructed. Moving on. This image I like because in it, it's just still from Mon Oncle. You see they have this big modern house, modern for the 60s, with or late 50s. There's a lot of segmentation, a lot of like walkways throughout the whole movie. They only walk anywhere on like the specific walkways. There's like stone paths that they walk on in the background. Each area is like segmented to have like its nice convenient purpose. But you could see that like everything is really just for show. Nothing's really comfortable. And what I like about this image specifically is he has this little umbrella, because of course you have your little umbrella on a sunny day on your patio while you're drinking coffee. But it's small, it's ineffective. The shadow from the umbrella is over there. It's not on him. It's doing nothing. So everything in these movies and Jacques Tati's movies is like this air of modern convenience, but in reality it's all just show. And so something I touched on earlier, all of Tati's work is this satire on modernity and technology and progression. He has a big love for nostalgia and like holding on to things, taking things slower. And in Anderson's earlier work, he doesn't really exhibit that. He's a younger guy. He's got a lot of vitality. And I think part of that comes from Tati starting filmmaking later in his life. He was already in his 40s when he decided to make movies. But later on, Anderson started adopting this in his work as well, starting with, I'd say, Grand Budapest, probably. French Dispatch, a huge portion of that movie is like a love for like newspapers and physical media and like experiencing people through like the written word. So they use that modernization, they use modernity as a way to like alienate people, which is what happens to Anderson's characters. They get alienated. They have to break that alienation. It happens to Monsieur Hulot, and he has to like, through sheer force of childlike wonder, kind of break out of this alienation. So this is a clip where from Fantastic Mr. Fox, where he's finally broken this veneer. He's had this in this whole movie. He's like in this facade. He's literally an animal, but he wears a suit. They have a society. They pay taxes and own homes. And this whole movie is trying to like break out of that facade. And it's at this point where he confronts his modernity and his past because he sees a wolf that can't communicate with them.
Where did he come from? Where'd you come from? What are you doing here? Canis lupus. Vulpus vulpus. I don't think he speaks English or Latin. Pensez-vous que l'hiver sera rude? I'm asking if he thinks we're in for a hard winter. He doesn't seem to know. I have a phobia of wolves. What a beautiful creature. Wish him luck, boys.
Good luck out there.
So, I mean, at this point, they can't communicate. He drives off in a motorcycle. The wolf just runs away. This is a wonderful reconciliation, I think, of the modernity and this modernized approach with technology and society and this rejection of our like baser natural selves. And he comes to terms with that while also accepting his animality. He finds a happy medium, which I think is very hard for people to find or accept in their day-to-day lives. I mean, we see movements of, hippie culture and cottagecore and DIY culture, people that like try to like embrace, like they'll live in a log cabin and like, you got Walden where their freaking Thoreau goes into the woods and thinks he's cool because like he's off the grid. But in reality, we are social people. We need a social construct. It's just coming to terms with that and also the individuality and accepting our baser instincts. I think that's something that's important that both these filmmakers recognize and share. And that's really my whole thing. That's my whole point. That's it.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions, comments, reactions? I asked him to only talk for half an hour so we could talk as a group. Because he could have gone on for a full hour easily.
Yeah, I definitely sped through that a little bit, so sorry guys.
Is there like a specific time period that Anderson draws from mainly? Like, does he draw from the time period of TT, or does he look at, other decades for his stories?
So he really does draw from like the 60s. Tati started a little bit earlier, but worked into the 60s, so like 50s into 60s. Anderson famously it has a lot of like new wave inspirations. The French New Wave was a movement going on in the 60s. Tati was like happening alongside that and not exactly within it because he was much more formal. So character-wise, Anderson takes a lot from the informality from the French New Wave, but the formalism, the formal aspects of this filmmaking, he derives from people like Tati. But yeah, I would say like the 60s is probably his biggest.
Yeah, that seems to be when a lot of his movies are set too. Or at least implicitly.
Well, aesthetically focused, sure.
Yeah.
But I do like, a thing about Anderson's movies that I do like is a lot of them like kind of don't take place in any specific time, even if they do. Like they're like in their own world, in their own place, in their own time. I mean, Fantastic Mr. Fox. They're talking foxes. Why can the farmers understand them? Sometimes they can.
Yeah.
He can't talk to a wolf. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But it's the feeling.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
you can go.
Oh, okay. The giant city that he made for the one movie, was that just in France? Like, where was it?
It was outside of France. It was in like right outside of the city.
Outside of Paris, you mean?
Yes, sorry, France is a country.
Yes.
Yeah, France is good.
You know, in high school one time, I said Philadelphia was one of the original 13 colonies, not Pennsylvania.
That's
so
okay.
that was something. Anyway, France is a country, and he built it in France,
Wow.
outside of Paris.
How big was it? Like, do you know?
It was like a couple square city blocks. So maybe like a square mile. I don't know the exact measurements of the space, but it was big. It was very inordinate for like movies don't do that. You know, most times for like big movie sets, they'll make maybe like a street or a cul-de-sac or like a couple rooms, you know. Or like the biggest ones will be in like Hollywood studio backlots, but those like stay there and they'll just like redress them. But yeah, this was just built for this movie and then destroyed immediately after.
That sucks.
I was gonna ask if it like just became part of Paris.
No, they built it because a lot of it wasn't like functional. It was, you know, they were like, even the ones that were real walkable spaces were not structurally sound enough to like actually survive and operate as buildings. They didn't have like electrical or plumbing running through them. They were just like basically like a giant box that looked like a building that you could walk around in, and like streets.
Anything else?
What's your favorite Wes Anderson film?
Oh, it's fantastic, Mr. Fox.
Okay, yeah, it's good.
This is my favorite movie ever.
Really?
Actually, yeah, I love that movie. It gets better every time I watch it. I
Yeah.
never get tired of it.
It was Fantastic Mr. Fox for me for a while, but then I watched I Love Dogs, and that was just like greatest movie I've ever watched.
I Love Dogs is awesome.
Yeah.
I do love that film.
You have a least favorite?
Well, that's like not fair. Actually, his newest movie I didn't like.
Oh, really?
Phoenician Scheme.
I haven't seen it yet.
I've seen it. I think I saw the trailer once.
Well, so this is kind of interesting because it goes into what I was talking about earlier of like people throw this criticism of Anderson being like style over substance. And I've been like a staunch defender of his for a while. Like that's not the case. I think Phoenician Scheme is the first movie where he really is just a parody of himself. And there's really nothing there under the surface. It's all just like, look at how controlled I am and how cool I can make these sets and like how precise my camera movements are. I would like to see him be challenged sometime soon. I would like to see a producer like not give him a good budget. I'd like to see some pushback from actors because that's another thing. All of his actors now, because he's gotten so big, they just buy into his shtick. They go onto his movies and they're like immediately on board because they know it's him. But there used to be a time where he didn't have as big of a name, and so actors would give him like pushback. Like Gene Hackman in The Royal Tenenbaums does not play a Wes Anderson character. He's just doing his normal Gene Hackman thing. And I think actors need to do that with Wes Anderson more. I think he does need to be put down a peg because he's gotten a little full of himself, and that's just my personal opinion. As a fan,
Tell them the story about the Falcon, like how controlled he wants everything to be.
oh yes,
I thought that was a really interesting anecdote to show how deeply he wants to control every aspect of his films.
So one of the reasons he started integrating stop motion into his feature films, even the ones that aren't stop motion movies, was because he like found that he like could not control animals like he could control people or like sets or anything. So in the behind the scenes for movies like World Tenenbaums, and there's a couple movies where he's doing this, he gets like incredibly frustrated because he can't get animals to do exactly what he wants. And so he's talking to a falconer on the set of Royal Tenenbaums because they have a falcon in that movie. And he was like, can we have the falcon like fly to the arm, take a beat, and then land? And the falconer was like, no, we're going to call the falcon and it's going to land right on the arm. Like, that's what it does. It's an animal. And he's like, but wouldn't it be cool if we did that though? Like, wouldn't it be cool? And the falconer shot him down because it's an animal. It's a wild animal. And he got like really upset about it. And he did that on a couple movies where he would like be dealing with animals and he would just get really frustrated because they wouldn't hit their marks like people do. So yeah, and then in Steve Zissou, all the animals are stop motion.
Yeah. And I think that kind of ties into what you were saying about you'd like to see actors push back more because animals just do it because they are what they are. They have their own nature, and you can't force that. With humans, we can kind of like convince them to go along with it, right?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think his like middle body of work is probably my favorite, where he has a budget and a lot of control, but he's still like there's still like these uncontrollable raw elements. And this is just opinion time. Where like I think that's part of the beauty of filmmaking is like things that you don't expect to happen, that you run with or make work. Because film is collaborative. You know, there's auteur theory, which and these two filmmakers are definitely like auteur filmmakers, where you see them as like the author of this film, like they are the creative force behind it, which is true to some extent. But also, Wes Anderson could not make any of these movies without his DP, without his production designers, without his actors, without the editor. You know, he can't do it all himself. Filmmaking is collaborative. There are hundreds of people on every set. Even the smallest sets will have like 100 people, you know, or like even student film sets, like 10 to 20 people. So you're never doing it by yourself. And generally, I find that the films that have the least amount of people working on them with one person doing the most jobs, I think are generally kind of weak and fall apart because you're managing too much. It's a collaborative art form. And I think he understands that. I do, because he has people he trusts, his DP and his production designers. Tati definitely understood that, you know, as in control as he was, he like trusted the team he had. It's just extending that trust into like the unknown that I think is something that some filmmakers, especially people of his caliber, struggle with.
Well, do you think? I mean, I would say that Tati's experiences and mine would influence that because in any performative art, you know, you can't control every moment. Because even though you've rehearsed something and done it 10,000 times, there's still going to be that one thing that kind of goes different every time. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's
Sure, yeah. I mean, I don't know much about miming.
Nor
I've
do
never
I.
seen it in person. I saw a clown show recently. I don't understand clowns. I don't know if it was good or bad. I didn't like it. But, you know, I have no basis for judgment, so good for them for putting themselves out there.
Yeah.
Did you go to clown school?
I don't know what their story was. I wish I got to talk to them. I thought it was just like a stand-up thing. My friend was doing stand-up, and then there was like a clown act and like an improv troupe. And I was like, I didn't sign up for any of this. But
It was a little bit.
good for those people for putting themselves out there.